Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Carolyn Bennett-Glauda, Programs and Outreach Manager at Southeastern New York Library Resources Council, which is part of ESLN. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Innovations in Employee Benefits. Before starting the program, I'd like to do some housekeeping. Because of the overwhelming interest in today's webinar, there are almost 175 people registered. We are using Zoom webinar. So that means that only the presenters and hosts have microphones and cameras enabled. So with that in mind, you can use the chat. We encourage you to use that now to introduce yourself to others if you'd like. You also just make sure your comment is going to everyone and not just panelists and hosts, which I think the default is now to everyone. If you have a question during the meeting, what we'd like you to do is to use the Q&A feature rather than the chat, so that will avoid your question getting lost among the other comments that might come through. This webinar is scheduled to run until 11 o'clock, but we might stick around for a little bit while after that in case there's questions. So if your question doesn't get answered, hang on. We'll try our best to get to it as we have time. And for those of you who don't know, Zoom offers automated captions. To view them, just click on the Show Captions icon in your Zoom screen or click the caret to view more options. And we also want to remind you that all attendees are expected to follow Southeastern's Code of Conduct, and I'll add that to the chat as soon as I finished the introduction. And in short, it just says, please treat all staff, event attendees, and speakers respectfully. Those of you who do not adhere to the Code of Conduct will be removed from the meeting. As you've probably noticed, we are recording today's event, and we will make the recording available to you as soon as we can after the webinar's conclusion. We will send you a link, a form to evaluate the panel discussion, and a request for the certificate of attendance. We will also share any handouts or other links that come up in the process of the webinar. And as long as a link to the other webinars that Cole is going to host for us in 2025. I'll be here in the background throughout the meeting in case you have any technical needs, so you can contact me directly through the chat if you need any assistance. So with all of that, I am very happy to turn the program over to Stephanie Cole-Adams.
Thank you, Carolyn. Hi, everybody. And joining me today is Kirsten Anderson, HR paralegal in my office. Kirsten's going to be monitoring the Q&A and maybe the chat, but Kirsten, you want the questions to go in the Q&A, right? Oh, I think you put instructions in the chat, so we're good. So she's going to interrupt. She's going to break in and interrupt me if there's a question that's timely on a topic. So keep those questions coming. And also after the formal presentation concludes at 11, I will linger. So if there's larger questions and you're able to stay on, we will spend time with those questions. So my name is Stephanie Cole-Adams. My nickname is Cole. My pronouns are she, her, and I have a law office in Buffalo, New York that is privileged to work with many, many libraries across the state of New York. Today's presentation, all of the images you'll see on the screen are really just there to give you something pretty to look at while we talk about some topics that could cause stress for employees, directors, and trustees. I see from the attendee list that we have a variety of people in different roles at libraries attending this session. And we're going to speak to the innovations in employee benefits from those different perspectives. And the images are really just there to give you some eye candy. And we're going to start it off with musicians and onlookers because we're here working together. So there is a learning checklist that was sent out to registered attendees. Everything that we're going to review that's on the slides, all the matters of substance are in the learning checklist. And we're actually going to revise the checklist based on questions that might arise or additional material and factoids that might come up. And that'll go back out and that'll be posted along with the recording. So I know the title promises innovations. And so for those of you who are looking at item number 1, you're probably like, innovation, update the employee manual. That sounds like a pretty tired old song. Or adopt an employee manual. That's not innovative. You're right. You got me. It's not innovative, but it is fundamental. I would just say for those of you, again, on the employee side, the trustee side, the director side, whatever role you're playing, it's more important to have a small or no employee manual than to have an out-of-date employee manual. I know you all know this, but this is really important. So when you're thinking about employee benefits and why does an employer have employee benefits? An employer has employee benefits to attract and retain and hopefully develop talent from within, right? It's all about creating a workforce that is so essential to the mission of your library. So before thinking about any innovations, although we are going to be talking about, we're talking about some pretty big benefits, and then we're going to talk about some fairly low-hanging fruit, some pretty easier things even for smaller libraries with small budgets. But I would say job number one, the fundamental on this is making sure that the employee manual is up to date. And if your employee manual hasn't been looked at in the last 5 years, chances are it is very out of date because there have been a lot of changes to the labor laws and employment laws. And it would be good to sort of put it on ice even, and then bring forward a new one and that is customized to your library. So I'm just going to put that out there that it might be an innovation for your particular library to update the employee manual. That is very important. And here we have a beautiful, with our first image from the Metropolitan Museum of Art, from an album containing 12 paintings of people making silk. So we're looking at pictures of people working together. So our next one, and this is going to look different. So we got an interesting question in advance, which is, are benefits limited in any way for employees as a nonprofit organization? So libraries, and of course, there's a subset to that question, which is association libraries, which are not-for-profit entities, or collaborative library systems, which are not-for-profit chartered education corporations, but they're not public. And then, of course, our public libraries. Both of those kinds of models have a limit on employee benefits in the sense that there is an obligation to make sure that the compensation, which benefits are often regarded from a tax and compliance perspective as a form of compensation, right? There's an obligation to make sure that those compensation packages are within reason, are not extravagant. So the kinds of benefits that you might see the CEO of a Fortune 500 company getting, by law, a not-for-profit entity, whether it's a public entity or a private entity, cannot offer those kinds of packages. So if any of you are looking for, the place where I say a company car, that is a Lamborghini for the director or anything like that, that's not happening. However, a vehicle that is owned by the employer, if you have someone who's traveling a lot, that might be reasonable. So there are limits on employee benefits. They have to be reasonable. And everything that we're going to be reviewing today is definitely within that realm of possibility, including this one right here. And I'm not going to watch the chat because you would see me get chat hypnotized while I'm trying to present. But I'm just wondering if there's any comments. So two things that workers really need these days. If you're watching, what are the pressures on workers? Childcare, elder care, elder companion, right? We've got a lot of workers who are in that sandwich situation. They've got young kids. Maybe they have aging parents that they're helping to take care of who maybe don't need intense medical needs, but need, social care, relationships, etc. So it takes a great deal of planning. So if you're a trustee who's attending and you're like, ooh, we could offer on-site childcare or affiliated childcare or elder companionship, right? For our employees, what would that look like? That is not something that could be implemented quickly. So, and the reason I was really happy to see that we have a lot of trustees who registered is this is the kind of benefit that would require probably at least one fiscal year, if not 2 fiscal years worth of planning while you figure out the model, while you figure out the mechanics, while you obtain the proper insurance, and you roll that out as an employee benefit. But if you are at a library that is having a struggle recruiting and retaining talent, and particularly, every library is different. Every library institution is different. Some of them, some of you out there have I wouldn't call it an embarrassment, but you have a great deal of real estate and you have the room to have something like this. Others of you are bursting at the seams. You literally have no room, but maybe there's a storefront nearby where something like this could be arranged. This is also the kind of thing that your library could collaborate with other not-for-profit organizations to offer along to employees of all the organizations. Just like I was saying on the previous slide, it it definitely is important to make sure that this is managed as a general employee benefit and it's not viewed as excessive. So this is the kind of thing you would want your library's attorney involved in the planning of it. And because of how critical it is, because of the risk factors of taking care of any human beings or providing this kind of service, it would take some deep planning, but it is very possible. This is the kind of thing a high functioning board with the will to do this and put this in a strategic plan, it can absolutely happen. And so I just want to put that out there. And for directors who are thinking, oh, how do I build our workforce at a time when librarians are under stress? We see the stress that the jobs can sometimes create, let alone life stress. This might be an option. This would need to go into deep planning with the board of trustees before it was ever mentioned as a possibility, right? Anything other than theoretical. Of course, all of the public libraries who are on this are subject to the open meetings law. So the planning process that the board would engage in would be, to a certain extent, open to the public. And that would be fine, because as long as care and attention is being made to the risk management and the compliance concerns, it's a possibility. So I'm going to move to our next picture for a minute, see if we had any questions. Um,
No questions so far.
Okay, so I really love this. This is five people working like 10 from 1861. This is again from the Met. So if any of you feel like you have five people working like 10 at your library, that's something we hear a lot. So I thought this would be relatable to some. So our next potential innovation, and again, this is not new, but one of the things I found in talking to libraries is there's some uncertainty in how to approach this. So obviously, librarianship is a uh, a job that requires a great deal of education and a commitment to lifelong learning. And employers do have the ability to, and this is again, this is how do you attract, how do you retain, how do you develop talent within your organization? Um, Employers actually can set up educational assistance programs. And a reason to set up an educational assistance program is this. So let's say I work at the ABC library and the ABC library says, you know what? We want to send you, if you take a class, we'll pay you back for it. If it's not set up properly, the payment that I get from the library, the reimbursement I get, actually could be taxable income to me. So by setting up an educational assistance program and the link, the IRS has an excellent FAQ on this. So we're not going to spend a lot of time on this one, but I would say for people who are, if you're EAP, Educational Assistance Program curious, visit this link or simply Google, right, Educational Assistance Program, IRS, and you will see the options includes helping with student loan payments, which have resumed, paying for tuition and under certain criteria. In order to do this, a board actually has to adopt a plan. It can't be something that the library simply says, you know what, we like that, we're going to do that. Put it in the budget, cool, right? There has to be a plan that's adopted by the board. The model for adopting that plan is actually, again, on the IRS website. The benefit is capped, I believe, at about $5,000, I want to say $5,250, but definitely in the $5,000 range. So, no one's going to law school on this, on this benefit. However, it really is, it's a great way to do it. And it's also a way to do it in a manner that's transparent, because by having the policy, making this a board approved benefit, and moving forward in this way, it doesn't look like any type of favoritism. It's a really deliberate effort to cultivate your workforce. So I encourage checking that out. Again, this is the kind of thing that you would want to think about in one fiscal year, consider what it would look like, adopt a program, and probably have it start with the next fiscal year because it has to be reflected in the library budget. Okay. And these are various people working in Blind Man's Bluff. There we go. All right. Item number 4. Now, so I put these two together because it used to be that when you said EAP, if people thought anything at all, they thought Employee Assistance Program. Nowadays, EAP is both Educational Assistance Program and Employee Assistance Program. So I just wanted to put them back to back to raise your awareness that if you see that acronym EAP in the employment context, in the benefits context, it might be employee assistance, it might be educational assistance. So EAP Part 2 is an employee assistance program. Again, this is not innovative per se, but two things. I think not all employers realize that this is an option, and for some employers, it's underutilized. So just in case you don't know, what is an employee assistance program? It changes from place to place and from provider to provider. But what it is, it's a third party provider. So it's a contract that the library, that your organization would enter into with an outside entity. And that outside entity has a menu of assistance that they can provide to your workforce. And that would include typical offerings are help finding childcare, immediate counseling, uh, substance abuse counseling, financial advice, all sorts of things. The menu from an employee assistance program really changes from place to place. I once worked with an employee assistance program who actually part of their menu of offerings was if something traumatic happened at the workplace. So maybe you had workers who had been subjected to abusive treatment by a patron or something like that. The EAP would actually come in and do like a workplace therapy session with the impacted workers to help them get over that trauma. So it's really important to not just, when putting out an RFP to find an employee assistance program, it's really important to think, wow, what are the kinds of help that we would like to be able to offer through this? So for those of you out there who, if your workplace hasn't considered this, um, it can be really important. I would add that these types of service are I've never seen a contract for an EAP that wasn't 100% confidential. In other words, the employer might get some anonymized utilization data because the employer wants to know, are our employees even using this? Is this worth it? But the employees who are calling to say, I have an issue I need help with, that information isn't flowing, back to the employer. It's 100% confidential. Um, so the other piece I would say is for those of you who have an employee assistance program, I would encourage you to look at the utilization data. Is it being used? If it's not being used, either it's not the right employee assistance program, you don't have the right menu of options, or employees don't know enough about it to feel familiar enough or comfortable enough using it. And so putting it out there and making sure employees really understand this really is confidential. Making sure they know that the employer has put this in place because they are valued employees and the employer wants to offer them this confidential resource. So this is really it's important, and it's important to not just have it and let it sit there, but really make sure it's being used. And that's also just making sure that it's a good use of limited budget dollars as well, because there's usually a flat fee, an annual fee that is paid to set up an EAP. All right.
We have a question. Do you have any advice on how to find providers for employee assistance programs?
Oh. So it is important to have, a lot of things are offered remotely these days, and I haven't looked too much into 100% remote service EAPs. I do think it's important to find an outfit that provides in-person services in your area, but that might not be what you need. So I'll throw that out there as my preference. A chamber of commerce is a great place to go. A local chamber of commerce. This is a standard employee benefits package item that a local chamber of commerce will know who are the EAP providers in your area and who are the ones that they are getting really positive feedback. So I would say the Chamber of Commerce is one place to look to, obviously asking for references, but also putting out an RFP and saying, we want to offer the following things for our employees. So maybe you, as the employer, want to say, okay, what's the menu we know we want? We know we want the following things. Boom, boom, boom. And then putting out an RFP and seeing what comes back and seeing how that provider can meet that need. So I think it comes down to really taking stock. Maybe having if your organization is larger, listening to the middle management, if you want to call them that, as to what are they seeing are the needs. But particularly if you're noticing that there's some problems with employees who, maybe they're using all their personal vacation time taking care of family, for instance, you might you might look to an EAP who can help them with lightening that load a little bit. So I think it's flexible, but I would say, to just on a practical level, local chamber of commerce. This is a good old fashioned word of mouth, might be a great place to start. I really liked this was the Champion of the People by Thomas Rowlandson. So I just thought this was, timely. There we go. Okay. Number 5. This is another one that it really needs to be thought through. However, some of these things are big ticket items, and I wanted to make sure I was putting out some smaller ticket items, and some of your institutions might be doing this already, maybe even informally. If it's informal, I think it would be good to make it a bit more formal, and that is on-site delivery acceptance. So, depending on where your library is, this might not be an issue. I believe the term is porch pirates. People concerned about having their deliveries dropped off at their house, and that could be deliveries of, just really simple things, craft items, all the way up to, pharmaceuticals and groceries, etc. Again, not all employers are going to have the space where this is feasible. And this also has to be developed in a formal way, so especially for a public institution, so it doesn't simply look like an abuse of public resources. But if this is something like this is set up and administered as an employee benefit, it can be done. So I did put association libraries, cooperative systems, and councils only. It could even be done at a public institution, but you just need to think it through. Because it can look, even the appearance can look bad. But on-site delivery acceptance benefits and just allowing a limited number of personal packages to be delivered, and signing up. And obviously, because I'm sure many of you are thinking, well, what about if something goes missing? Are we responsible? So it would have to be set up to manage those those concerns, but that can be done. And so this is something that could be set up. And this is a small one, but for quality of life concerns, this could be very helpful to employees who are waiting for important deliveries. So I just wanted to put that in there as a small thing. And this is masons squaring a block. This is just stone masonry art, working together, making the pyramids. There we go. So number 6, this one really is for only private organizations, affiliation benefits. So these are negotiated benefits that your not-for-profit organization that is not a public institution has reached out and negotiated. And it could be just little things like, a percentage off a cup of coffee at the local coffee shop. A discounted tickets at the car wash, all these things. That's something that could be set up, and then you could obtain those benefits with an employee ID. Usually there's some kind of quid pro quo when these things get set up. So in setting up something like this, it's careful to say, well, what is the benefit? But on the other hand, it might not be. It might just simply be a business saying, well, we know we want people coming from the library because we know people trust librarians for recommendations, and so we want them to come to our business, have our great coffee, and if they're holding their coffee mug with our logo on it, it's going to look good. Again, those are the kinds of reasons why this is for private organizations, because going there as a public institution can bring some risks. But for our association libraries, it's something to think about. And
We have a question about on-site delivery, actually. Why can't school district libraries utilize on-site delivery?
so as long so public institutions, so there's two reasons. There's a couple additional hoops you'd want to engage in setting up the benefit if that was happening. But just bearing in mind that as a public institution, there's higher scrutiny for the use of public resources for the people who work there. The other reason is the optics of that. Now, the legal hurdles actually, if it is a genuine benefit, and especially, actually, I would say this, if you're in a union environment, this is the kind of thing that, again, if handled properly, could be a benefit that's listed in a collective bargaining agreement, right? And then once it's in the collective bargaining agreement and it's understood that it's part of the suite of employee benefits, it actually, it could be done. However, it needs to be done so carefully. I put that on there because I'm just mindful of, the PowerPoint is going to be out there. It could be negotiated, but it requires some care and consideration of the optics, because it's the kind of thing where you could have someone just taking a picture of the employee getting their package and it's subject to criticism. So you know what, we'll make a note that we'll amend the slide and it a little bit, just to say, public institutions should only do this with great caution. I'll put some caveat words in there. So thank you. That's a good question. The affiliation benefits, though, don't do it. I mean, if you find a lawyer who puts it in writing that your public library can negotiate this, get it in writing and keep the copy. But because of the appearance and because of the way the fiscal benefits would flow, I would be very nervous about doing this with a public institution. Again, though, for association libraries, this could be a nice little perk. Okay. 7. Now, after I just got done with all those caveats about, what can a public library do versus an association library or another private organization? Micro award program. So a micro award program is a budgeted program that offers small rewards for acknowledged acts of achievement, kindness, and professionalism. And in a program like this, employees, so this is not a merit raise. This is not a commendation by a supervisor or a director. This is something where employees can even nominate each other for this. And the awards, I mean, the awards could be given however you wanted to structure the program. Could be weekly. That might be a little bit too frequently, right? Could be monthly, could be quarterly, right? Whatever you want. And examples of this could be, movie tickets, gift cards, things with a nominal value, but nevertheless are nice to get. And obviously you don't want the gift certificate for $20 at the restaurant where the first entree costs $40, right? That's not so thoughtful. But picking little things and then setting up a system where an employee, and this is a great thing for online forums. So let's say an employee just sees another employee engage in just, go over and above with a really great act of kindness for a patron. Or for that matter, go over and above with a great act of kindness for a fellow employee. And it's the kind of thing that you want to encourage that at the library, but you're not going to put it in someone's job description because it truly is more, in the spirit that you want to operate. And then making sure there's clarity about who evaluates. So if I was the employee and I was able to nominate and I said, oh, Kirsten, went over and above, she did this great thing. Here we go. I'd like to nominate her. And then that award goes out. And I see that happening, then I know my voice has been heard as an employee, even if I'm an employee who's not a supervisor. It's reinforcing my recognition of what makes the workplace not only operate, but a special place to be. And this is the kind of thing that can be done, depending on the size of your institution, with an extra, and I know this is not chump change for some libraries, but with an extra $500. This is also the kind of thing that for libraries that have friends, this is the kind of thing your friends can sponsor. So there are ways to set this up. Now, there are some restrictions for public libraries on giving certain kinds of perks, too many perks to employees just in general. However, by making something like this a formal program, a formal attraction and retention program, you get over that hurdle. So setting up something like this And then, running it on an experiment, maybe running it every other year even, or maybe running it and thinking, my goodness, this is so wonderful. We do this once a month. And it's just a nice little thing. Maybe just running it in perpetuity. So there's a lot of ways to set it up. It just needs to be clear. And then, the gifts being $20 of less or less, and, making sure no one gets more than $75 worth of benefit, a year, right? Making sure that the wealth is shared. It can be really helpful. So, and then you can also come up with a name that's unique to your institution about, what is this called, right? Like the golden book, you can have fun with that part too.
Okay, we have a couple of questions. Oh, more than a couple. First, we're in the process of switching our full-time work week from 35 hours over 5 days to 32 hours over 4 days as a benefit to full-time employees. Do you have any advice on what we should look out for during that process? We're a small association library.
Okay, thank you for adding the small association library. So a lot of the things that my brain just went, danger, danger, went away because it's an association library. Um, so going down, let's see, full time is now going to be 4 days a week, 32 hours. Um, I think when doing that, just making sure, as always, great care is taken as to how employees are classified under the Fair Labor Standards Act. So are the employees hourly or are they salaried? And you all know that there's some concerns about making sure that when in doubt, employees should be hourly. If there's any doubt as to what category they fall into, they should be hourly. And of course, if they work in excess of 40 hours within the standard, within that standard 7-day work week, um, then they need to be paid time and a half, which is why it's important to have a overtime policy that requires permission before overtime is worked. So I would say, other than that, just making sure. Um, so if there's a retirement plan at this association library that is based on full-time status, check the plan document for the retirement plan to make sure that full-time is not defined with that 35 hours or more, or working 35 hours, because you could end up having compliance problems with your retirement plan document. So of course, not all association libraries have retirement plans, so that might not be an issue, but that would be a big one. Um, and making sure that you are tracking employees by hours and not working days. So some employee manuals and payroll, and sick leave and vacation award things in days, uh, making sure that that is converted to hours and that there's clarity. So you don't want people who have accrued a certain amount to lose anything as you move forward, as you do this conversion. So just being ready and to take a look at whatever's in the employee manual. Is there any collateral effect when you are changing, when you're going from 35 to 32? I think that's important. So but the retirement piece is the biggest one, because the consequences, if that's if there is a retirement plan, the consequences could be expensive. So better to take care of that now. And if your retirement plan does say the retirement plan is eligible to people who are working at least 35 hours a week, it's no problem to work with the provider to amend the plan. I say no problem. It's administrative paperwork. It's a thing, but it's certainly something that can be done. So better to do it, in anticipation of the change than after.
Okay, we have a couple more questions moving back to the micro rewards. Um, if a municipal library had the Friends Fund small rewards, would that be okay to do? I'm thinking one per quarter for a $20 gift card to go out to eat.
Yes, absolutely. The important thing is to make sure it's set up with a policy and that there's clarity about how do the nominations happen, how are the awards, how are the awards bestowed, and making sure that there's no conflict of interest, right? So, and I know you all know this, but I'll just say this, right? If the president of the Friends is married to the employee who wins the first three micro awards, things are gonna not smell good. So, just making sure that there's probably just a one-page policy that says we're implementing this. It's being funded by generous donations of the friends who have an interest in making sure that we're acknowledging our hardworking employees, and it's going to be administered in the following way. Yep. And then just having, if there's a town attorney or village for a municipal library, making sure that if there's a local attorney who helps you out, that they've taken a quick look at it. But yes, that's exactly what the friends could be doing. But I do want to emphasize that considering having the employees able to acknowledge each other, I think that's not essential, but that if it's possible, that's an important piece of this. Go ahead.
And also related to micro award program, should we have a policy regarding expenses on staff generally? For example, staff lunch, retirement recognition event, etc.
So I think the most important policy to have when it comes to, expenses and or reimbursement is deep clarity on reimbursement for travel and use of petty cash. Obviously, those are the most important ones. For librarians, there's always an area of tension around how do we pay for people to go to conferences? Who's going to if someone's going to the conference, are they being paid for the hours that they're there? Are they expected to go when they're on vacation? How is their hotel getting picked up? We're not going to talk about that too much, but I will mention it's important. If someone is going to a conference because they are expected to go as part of the library, and their lodging and their registration fee is being paid for, then they should be being paid for the time that they are attending, and there should be professional expectations about how they are participating in the event. If they are simply taking some days off and they get to go on their own, then the library shouldn't be paying for it. It should be one or the other. There should be, and the reason this is important, this is really key, is if that employee is injured while attending the conference, if they're there on work time, it's covered by workers' comp. If they're not there on work time, it's not. And you don't want to have an ambiguity there, because then you could have an employee whose health insurance carrier is denying them a benefit because the carrier will say, well, you were there for work, and you could have a conflict. It's just really important to have clarity. Are they there for work, or are they there not for work? But to go back to the question, yeah, I think anytime if employees are getting budgeted library money or some kind of other benefit because of their work at the library, there should be a short policy governing that, so there's clarity. And that's not just for compliance, that's also for the optics, so that if there's an audit from the comptroller, or you have an angry taxpayer, a concerned citizen, that you can easily be transparent about why that employee is getting what looks like, some kind of perk, right? Because it's part of our program. We do that. Do we have another question on that one, or on that?
No, I think we're good on that.
Okay. All right. Ladies sewing, quote unquote. It's a great picture. All right. Compensation analysis, COLA, merit raises, and project accomplishment stipends. This, again, not innovative. None of these are new. However, this is something that should be constantly revisited, and there should be continuous innovation in this. And this is for our trustees who are attending, not the specific awards, not the specific evaluations, which of course the library director or the executive director is going to be actually managing the workforce and determining these things, but the art of budgeting to support compensation analysis, cost of living adjustments, merits raises, and project accomplishment stipends. In other words, if there's been maybe there's an ambitious project that's been identified. So, let's say the library director, who normally has a million things that they have to do, now has 1,000,001 because they're managing a construction project. And the board realizes, oh my goodness, we're depending on this person to keep the library going on a day-to-day basis, but they're going to have to go above and beyond. We're going to acknowledge that additional work with a stipend. All of these are possible. Again, it's important to document it properly, to set it up properly, to think through the tax and the compliance aspects. But we got that great question in advance, which was, are there any limits for not-for-profits and public institutions? All of these can be done as long as they are done properly. And as your library is engaging in its budget planning and thinking, how are we going to attract and retain our workforce? How are we going to show our employees that they are valued? How are we going to incentivize the kind of performance that we know we rely on? This is a big part of the toolbox. All of these obviously come from budget, and thus they need to be supported by the board, in the sense of the board needs to write it into the budget and needs to make sure that there's a policy in place for the use of each one of these things. In general, a compensation analysis, which is a study to make sure that your library is not overpaying, not underpaying folks, that there's a good solid range. That should be done probably no less than every 5 years. Every 3 years, I think, is good. You want to make sure that you're not paying different people for the different rates for the same work, etc. For those of you who are in civil service, of course, there's a civil service element to all of this. So that's when I say making sure it's properly planned. It's considering the civil service obligations as well.
We have a couple of questions. Returning to the previous topic, can a school district public library use taxpayer dollars to pay for things like staff Christmas parties, including a small gift card, like $15 for each staff member?
So mindful that we are being recorded, I am going to say generally no, but. And I will put an answer to the no, but in the amended version of the handout, because that's a presentation in and of itself, but I will put that in there. But I want the takeaway right now for the moment to be no, but. So, and the but is, there's some things that can be done. It has to be planned very, very carefully. That is another task for the friends, with appropriate conflict of interest management can help with that. But we will get that into the handout. Thank you.
Okay. And we have a question that was typed into the chat. Please help me out and type them into the Q&A. But can public library employees attend advocacy meetings and events with elected officials as part of their work with compensation for food and time?
Okay. So this is a great question. So, and we'll add a little note, just say as a discussion point. So any person who is reaching out to elected officials on behalf of your library, trustee, paid lobbyist, library director, should be tracking their expenses as part of the lobbying policy. So so there's a couple things. Advocacy in general, going out and being at Albany with a sign, things like that, attending Albany sessions, maybe even appearing at Albany, as a witness. Although it's important to pay close attention to the definition of lobbying, the state law definition of lobbying, that tends to not be lobbying. Contacting elected officials can be lobbying, to ask for specific things. And it's important that every library is going to be in a different position with this. It's important that there be a lobbying policy in place. If there are significant expenses being incurred because of that, those expenses do need to be tracked, and in some cases they need to be reported. I'm not going to go into a thing on lobbying policy. We could talk about if people want something about lobbying policies, let us know, because I've got a lot to say on it. And it's certainly changed a lot. It changes a lot all the time because Albany just can't stop arguing with itself about lobbying and ethics and integrity. So it is a very important topic. So for this, I would just say if it's a Google search away, right? New York State lobbying, and you can see a lot of what I'm talking about right there. But definitely important to track the expenses, including the percentage of worker time that is spent on that contact. Yes.
Thank you.
All right. I can't wait to get into my garden. I know it's not going to happen for another couple months, and I am sad about it. There we go. Okay. I think again, I'll say this is a little bit of an innovation. So every one of your institutions for our attendees have a different array of policies that you either have to follow by law or you've agreed to follow per policy or you've agreed to follow in a collective bargaining agreement. And that creates what I've called, and I did it in a session for ESLN last year where we talked about just essentials of employee leave. I call this the continuum of leave. So for employees who are facing their own health needs, the health needs of their family, maybe they have a new child, maybe they've been injured at work and they need to be out. Maybe they're experiencing a disability that's requiring them to take time off work, but that disability was not induced by a workplace injury. Having an FAQ that explains how all this stuff works together, I am finding is incredibly helpful to your employees. What do I do if I'm sick? How many days before you need a note from my treating physician? What if I have to go to court for a protective order? Like having an FAQ, because I have yet to see any library handle this the same way. And that includes, of course, we have the different library types who are in attendance today and library systems as well. Association libraries have to follow different laws than, the public libraries. The public libraries, however, can often, they have options in certain things. So some public libraries have opted in to paid family medical leave. They didn't have to do it, but they opted into it. And that needs to be coordinated with all of these other types of leave. People need to know if they're being given time off to address a disability, they need to know they've been given a disability accommodation. So this, it's important to have all the policies, but trust me, especially when someone's not feeling great because either they're personally sick or they're dealing with family stress due to the illness of a family member, or they're sleep deprived because they have a new baby. Going through 5 different policies to figure out what they're doing can be very, very difficult. And having a one-page FAQ that walks them through it. And I will say this, for those of you who have to administer these policies, so I'm talking mainly to directors, unless we, I know we have some bigger institutions attending, so maybe we've got, some internal HR folks here. Going through this exercise also helps you be a better administrator of those things, because when the employee comes to you and says, well, I need to take my child to the doctor, and I'm going to need to do that every day for the next, twice a week for the next 6 months, because they're very sick and they need continuous medical attention. You can let them know, are they doing that with paid family leave? Are they using their vacation? Are you going to protect their job while they're away because you have to follow FMLA, which, newsflash, right? All of the public libraries have to follow FMLA. And if you're an association library with over 50 employees, not too many of them, but you're out there, right? You also have to follow FMLA. All of you have to follow the New York State human rights law, even if you don't have enough employees to trigger following the ADA. So it's this endless it's endless permutations. And if you do this exercise, if you create an FAQ for your library based on your policies and what you do, you will be a better administrator. And it is also an act of mercy to your employees at a time when they probably need it the most. So that's the innovative piece here. There's nothing innovative about vacation leave, personal time, workers' compensation, et cetera. But having a document that puts it all together and making sure that that's clear in your minds definitely is an innovation. And I have been urging and advising places to do this because it truly is a game changer for employees who are at a time of struggle. A terracotta statuette. Okay. Um, I tried to throw in a couple things that were innovative and also, again, not necessarily expensive. Just they do require some labor, so they don't come without cost. And I have a feeling many of you do things like this already, because libraries are innovative, and so this would be a structured individual fun days. And this is the ability of an employee to work with their supervisor to structure a day that only includes the thing they love best about their job. That's going to change from employee to employee, right? So, and for those of you who are thinking about, the different members of your teams, you've got your extroverts, you've got your introverts, you've got your people who truly love to take a day and make a display, and then other folks for whom the best thing in the world would be a structured individual quiet day where they are just left alone and they get to do, right? There's certain deliverables that have been built into it, but it's a day when they know they're going to be quiet. Maybe it's a day when they know that they could even be wearing, earbuds or something like that, listening to whatever music they like and just doing the work. And if this becomes a normal thing, so there are a lot of employees who need this, and there are some people who I want to be really careful. So there are some folks who need specific circumstances like a quiet place, maybe specific lighting, maybe the ability to wear earbuds, and they need that because of a disability. So I myself, every now I talk about it because I try to normalize talking about these things. I have ADHD. There are certain things I need to be productive. My staff can attest, Kirsten can attest to trying to chase me down at times. So, if someone needs that for an ADA, that should be set up as an ADA accommodation, not an employee benefit, right? So someone who has this need because it is a genuine need, you've documented it, this is what they need in the workplace, give them their accommodation, right? It's not a benefit. However, both these, structured individual fun days and the structured quiet day, if you make that a normal thing, especially if you have a library where you're maybe trying to dial back on remote work, which is a trend that's happening now. Everybody got excited about remote work. It's working great for some employers. It's not working so great for other employers. So they're calling people back into the office. We're not going federal government talk right now, but so this is a way, and it could even have someone could even have a little sign on their desk. This is my structured quiet day. This is my structured fun day, and people know, and you make it a thing, and that can be a morale booster. I think actually you'll find it can even be a productivity tool, but it's an employee reward as well, and it's a benefit. It can be a benefit. Um, okay. Let's see, checking my time. Oh, good. All right. So I mentioned that some public libraries, so municipal libraries, school district public libraries, special district public libraries, um, for the most part, especially if you're treating your employees as civil service employees, you are a public employer, you are subject to all of the requirements of public employers. That means, unlike association libraries and cooperative library systems, you do not fall under the Paid Family Medical Leave Act. However, the Paid Family Medical Leave Act, I think, is a great thing. It's an insurance policy that qualifying employees can get now. I believe I want to say it's 65%. The ratio has been going up, of their work of their compensation, with a cap, of course, if they have to be out due to a variety of factors involving family medical needs. Public entities can make a choice to opt into that. That includes, even if you have a union, you do need to, confirm that with the union, and there's a couple extra steps on that. But this is a great option, and I'm going to mention this because one thing that Kirsten and I see every now and again is libraries that have, and remember how we started at the beginning talking about, oh, my goodness, update the employee manual, right? So one of the things that we see in older employee manuals is this sort of vague, discretionary personal leave, paid or unpaid, that both libraries and all types of libraries sometimes have it in there. And it's the kind of thing that the library director or maybe the board have discretion to grant it. And it's like just this magic additional leave. Typically, given where we're at in employee benefits, I advise not using that approach anymore. I think it's very dangerous to have any type of discretionary employee benefit. That is the recipe for a claim of discrimination. It's just the way it is. And I would say for those of you who have that kind of legacy, undefined discretionary personal leave, if you are at a public library and you don't already have, if you haven't opted into paid family medical leave, explore changing that, because the premiums are not cost prohibitive. Like all things, there is a cost. Yes, that cost can be can be charged to the employees, or it can be picked up by the employer. So that's something that has to be thought about. Oof, coffee. Mm. But once it's implemented, you have the ability for employees who, again, that example I used where you have someone who needs to take their child for medical care on a regular basis, and maybe they've been a great employee and you don't want to lose them, but how can you how can you make sure that you're being fair to your other employees while you're holding their job and maybe they're on some sort of paid leave? This is the answer. So for our trustees here, for our directors who are thinking, wow, I've got at the public libraries. And your employees, maybe they have their own personal struggles, but also their families might also be causing some extra stress for them. This is an option, and I strongly encourage that a board review. Not now, upon review, a board may decide, nope, that's not what we're going to do. We're going to do something else. But this should be considered, and it should be considered from a cost-benefit analysis, because for the most part, once the numbers are crunched, boards will say, my goodness, what a great deal. Instead of just approving someone to go on either a leave where they're getting no pay, or we're picking up the tab, it's covered by insurance, which of course has spread out the costs. Sorry, a little bit of a soapbox there, but it can be a game changer. All right, we just got two more things to get through. This is not such a happy one, but it's important. Check your insurance. I did a presentation on directors and officers insurance a little bit ago. Check your insurance to see, does it cover accusations of criminal conduct? Here in New York, I don't want to panic you. There are protections baked into the penal law for any person who's a library worker who is working according to policy and accused of, a harmful to minors charge. But knowing that there's insurance coverage for that that can help a director or a worker sleep at night. And that's a good thing. And finally, this is one you need an attorney on board for, but I think it's good to start considering using employment contracts, especially for your employees that if you're in a union environment, there already is a contract, but employment contracts are a great way to assure employees of certain terms and benefits, including the fact that there might be insurance to cover them for a variety of things. And it can also be a way to set goals. That definitely is you need an attorney to help draft the contract. You need to think, why are we using this contract? And of course, you need to think about your particular library, what type of library you are, and the constraints you might have on the contracting. But employment contracts are a way to go above and beyond to give some protection. On the flip side, for the employer, they can do things like requiring people to give additional notice. I'll say this to the trustees out there, if you have a director who you think, oh my goodness, if this person left, boy, and we didn't have 6 months notice to try and find a replacement because they're so amazing, and boy, would we be up a creek, right? That's when to start thinking about an employment contract, because it can provide assurance and stability for your employee, but also for you, which is a good employee benefits package. It does both. So on that, we are at 11. I hit it. I will stick around for questions. Oh, yes. Final image. And I do encourage you, go to the Met's online resources and look up this picture, which is the Gulf Stream by Winslow Homer, painting at the Gulf, and read the write-up on this. And I think I'll just leave that for you to find. It's a brilliant painting and a brilliant write-up, and I think it would enhance your day to read the write-up on that. And now we can do some Q&A. And for those who are just like, hey, I'm done, you're going to get your certificate from Carolyn. So.
And I just
We
dropped
have
those
a
links in the
comment that
chat. Sorry, go ahead.
it's okay. We've got a comment that people have enjoyed the art, so
But
very well. And a question, how would we go about implementing health insurance in a public library?
So there's no easy answer to this. I would say talking to the Chamber of Commerce locally is another good. So when you're looking for that employee assistance plan, asking the Chamber of Commerce what they might have set up. And recently I've been talking about similarly situated libraries in within geographic range of each other, actually working together. You can't form what's called a multi-employer plan group, right? And which is why small employers are at such a I speak as a small employer, at such a disadvantage to large employers in this, because you're just not bringing a lot of bargaining power to the table. But there is nothing that says you can't work together to try and find a good quote and assure that carrier that you're actually your business comes together as a group. That is something that I can't, we could talk about that forever, but I would say starting to explore that is a good option. Chamber of Commerce is a good punt on my part for looking for that as well. New York State Health Insurance Program, of course, NISHIP, but that's the standard go-to, so, for the publics.
I don't see any other questions, Cole.
Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you, everybody. I hope you have a really great and restful weekend. Thanks for spending the time. If something comes up, you want to shoot us an email, feel free. We're going to send out the final version of this with a couple other comments that we talked about. And I hope everybody has a great day. And again, if any last minute questions have trickled in, I'll linger just a little bit and talk shop with Tessa and Carolyn just in case.